Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed people can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. Margaret Mead.
You have these things that I call tradition that you often have to combat when you're trying to introduce new ideas or new technologies.
And it has really ended up stimulating people, getting people arguing. Because, well, I don't agree with that. Well, fine. Then build a better mousetrap.
The new buzzword these days is precision feeding. And really, by precision feeding, we mean, can we maximize the capture, usually of nitrogen and phosphorus in milk, and minimize what is excreted in urine and feces?
Model or a nutrition program for our cows that will keep the soccer moms happy, and really importantly, as far as I'm concerned, the producer profitable and his cows healthy.
These models have allowed us to take advantage of the volumes of research that has been published. And you know, it's fine for a researcher to do his research, publish it in the Journal of Dairy Science, but if it doesn't get applied, its value really goes down. And this is something that modeling has allowed us to do.
To apply this biology, to take these concepts, which are pretty darn difficult when you start talking about rates of digestion and rates of passage and all of these kinds of things, and complicated fatty acid submodels and what have you, and be able to incorporate that into something we can use.
We managed to find a unique optimization program that was developed at the University of Maryland. And it was not an easy program to implement into CPM. And it was because of my colleague, Ray Boston, that we were able to implement it in the CPM. Other people have tried to implement that same program into a nutrition model, and they've not been successful.
To get out there and really do what Bill is saying is it's a learning and humbling experience at the end of the day.
Back in the spreadsheet days, and I would do rations at home at night, and I would sit on my computer, I would have the TV on, and I would have USA Today and Sports Illustrated. And I would hit optimize and watch TV for a while, you know, read for a while, and then finally there would be a solution. Or what was frustrating is after that time there was no solution.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, God. I used to,
Just a short period of time is unbelievable.
I used to optimize for all 8 or 9 amino acids, right? And I was using the IBM program at the main computer center. Well, the only time they would let me in would be at 1 in the morning. So they'd run my program between 1 in the morning and 5. And you know, when you realize that what I was asking it to do, you could run on my almost this anymore. It just kind of blows your mind. And then I went and spent 3.5 hours with Pete at his place. Remember how we used to go there? And with Pete Van Soest.
Not out on a lake, were you?
Well, we were in his house. Okay. We were outside and inside, and there was no scotch.
That I can't believe.
He would have offered it to me, but I said, Pete, no. But you know, that was probably the highlight of my whole week. We talked about fiber, and I said, and then we started talking about sugars. And this is the typical comment of Pete. I said, well, I've been looking at 5-carbon sugars lately. And I said, I noticed that when I do some analysis on data, that if the arabinose as a percentage of the hemicellulose goes up, that the digestibility of the fiber goes up. And he said, yeah, well, that's in my book. So he digs out his book from the 90s, right? And sure enough, there it is. And I'm a little embarrassed because I didn't read it.
The key in the CPM platform, Charlie, was our programmer.
Oh, yeah.
Eileen
She was amazing.
And I never went to Eileen and said, Eileen, this is what we need to do, where she didn't say, yeah, we can do that. She never said, no, we can't do it, it's impossible. Yes, we can do it.
Yeah, she was an amazing lady.
Idea of how many people you've influenced, either to develop programs that are extensions of CPM or...
I wouldn't have any idea.
It's just been too many, or?
Right. One training session, and this is where people brought their own computers.
Not you.
And there was a person, or an individual in there, who had a computer that was really old. And we hit the optimize, and before we went out to dinner, everybody else's computer had optimized. This one hadn't. So we said, okay, we'll go out to dinner. We came back from dinner, Charlie, and it still hadn't optimized.
Oh my gosh.
I looked at him and I said, hey, if you're going to use CPM and want to optimize, the first thing, get a new computer.
Farmers are feeding more forage because they couldn't afford the grain. Well, they're finding out the cows are doing reasonably well. Gee whiz, and some of them are even a lot healthier as a result of that. Because the producers have been producing very good quality forages, but we have been underrating them. Now, the model actually has been saying that. But the nutritionists that use the models have not necessarily done what the model says.
What you have to do is remember that the model and computer cannot think. And in all the times that Charlie and I have given courses on how to use CPM, what I've always said is, okay, here's the ration that we got with the optimizer. Now look at the ingredients and decide whether or not you would feed those ingredients and those amounts to your own cattle if you had cattle.
We may be able to start to go towards within-day models, believe it or not. And in other words, you go on the farm, and it's exactly what he's talking about, and you find out just how they are feeding this pen of cows on a within-day basis. And we'll be able to predict the response of the cow behavior to eating, which will change the dynamics in the rumen and the dynamics in the metabolism of the cow. And that's going to be cool.
I can remember when I first started talking about amino acids, and this was down in Mexico. And I would give talks about amino acids, and there was another nutritionist that would follow me by, say, a couple of weeks or months, and someone would say, well, Dr. Chalupa had mentioned amino acids, and this nutritionist would say, amino acids are for pigs and chickens. not for dairy cattle. Well, I won't name this nutritionist, but today he is a proponent of amino acids.
Start talking about rates of digestion and rates of passage and all of these kinds of things, and complicated fatty acid submodels and what have you, and be able to incorporate that into something we could use.
The group that should receive some credit in model development is the end user, the advisor out in the field that's formulating rations. And when I first started with CPM Dairy, I wanted a user-friendly model. And I think we achieved that. And the way we achieved it is we spent 2 to 3 years in what we call beta testing, where nutritionists out in the field had the model and were using it, and they gave us valuable feedback. They would have suggestions, well, it sure would be nice if the model allowed us to make this type of mix, or the model allowed us to have this type of a report. And so that was invaluable in developing this field-efficient CPM dairy model.
There's a lot of that area in Vermont. You cannot have a dairy larger than 100 to 150 cows. It's just impossible because of the landscape. Well, okay, so they're all gone. We're going to wipe them out, and it's going back to trees. That's the one scenario. The other scenario is, you know, how can these dairies be sustainable and profitable in their, not only in the current generation, but in the future generations? And that becomes the challenge of all of this. And of course, then you get into price control scenarios, et cetera, you know, supply management and all this kind of thing going forward. And I have really mixed feelings about that.
Well, there's no doubt going to be fewer farms and fewer dairy cows. And, you know, we get into this big argument about family farms and factory farms. Well, just because a farm is large does not mean it's a factory farm.
Amen.
I wouldn't say that everybody that contributed had a small ego. There were some of the contributors that had rather large egos. Yeah. And I think the reason that it worked is Danny Fox and Charlie could recognize, okay, Professor A has a huge ego, but boy, he can contribute. So how do we work around the ego that he has? And I think that's the key.
Anything that you want to add, you just want to say, you know, you've been doing all this for all these years, anything that you want to tell the world that we just, anything you want to get off your chest?
I think we've kind of done that.
I think we did. I'm worried we may have said too much.
The passion for dairy from both of you, did you both come from dairies? Were you raised as
I came from a small
dairy
farm.
Bill?
My parents had a dairy farm in New Jersey. And we were a big dairy farm. We were milking 40 cows. And, you know, in the 50s,
yeah,
that was big.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Pleasure.